Hi, this is James Hammond, the Brand Doctor, here to help you build a powerful brand for your business. The subject is public relations, or PR as we know it, and I want to know what PR is all about in terms of how it can help your business and your brand. And I'm delighted and honoured to be joined by Farzana Baduel, who is Managing Director of a London-based global PR agency called Curzon PR. It's got offices here in London, where we're speaking from, but also in New York and Dubai and Delhi. And Farzana herself is a PR expert, there's no doubt about that. She was formerly Vice Chair of Business Relations for the Conservative Party. And in 2014, Farzana was awarded the Media Professional of the Year Award at the Asian Media Awards, and has been shortlisted for many other awards. I'm not surprised about that. Curzon PR's clients range from global governments to major corporates, arts and culture, luxury goods, food and drink and travel. So quite a spread of clients in different markets. So Farzana, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about PR. So let's get straight into, if you like, the basic question. What is PR actually all about? I've heard many different definitions. And what in practical terms does it mean for the business owner of today?
I'd say PR is very difficult to define because our industry is changing so rapidly, and before a lot of people would perceive PR as media relations, but we are now working across content marketing and across events and awards. In essence, what PR really is about gaining trust, earning credibility, and about creating, building and protecting a reputation.
Right. So in terms of branding, how would you say that branding fits into the role of PR? And indeed, how does PR fit into the role of branding?
I mean, branding is actually crucial for us because if a client or a brand comes to us and they have skipped the branding part, or they're not really familiar in terms of what are their brand values, coming to communicators like us, we will of course communicate, but if their key messages are not consistent or rooted in their brand values, ultimately it's a waste of everybody's time.
Right.
So they really need to undergo the branding phase. They need to understand who they are, what their brand values are, what their positioning is, what their differentiation points are between themselves and others on the competitive landscape. And in order for them to be successful in public relations, they have to absolutely ensure that they have gone through the branding process and they have a robust understanding of who they are and what they stand for.
Right, okay, that makes perfect sense. So can you give me an example of where combining PR and branding gives major gains, if you like, in influencing opinion and behaviour in a commercial context?
Yes, so for instance, a lot of people, they come to us because they want top-tier press coverage, and it is important that when they come to us and when we're liaising with different media, be it CNN, BBC, Wall Street Journal, that we understand what are the key messages they want to talk about. So often if they come to us with their brand values, we will ensure that those brand values are then we take that and then we build key messages for them, and then to ensure that those key messages in turn are fed to the journalists with the hope that they will be in the narrative, in the article. Now, because getting a piece in the BBC is not PR. Getting a piece in the BBC where the key messages of the client that are rooted in the brand values of the client, that is the effective combination of branding and PR working in conjunction to actually build a brand, because PR should not just be used as just exposure and exposing a brand without a coherent brand positioning. Right. So they work jointly.
Okay,
yeah.
That all sounds very positive, so let me introduce a bit of a negative into the conversation. We've seen a number of situations in the past where PR has attempted to address what we would call crisis management. There's a problem that is caused by one thing or another in a corporate. So it seems to me that when you look at how that is handled, it's usually extremely badly, as from my perspective. I'm thinking, for example, of the BP Deepwater Horizon situation, which just seemed to be a total mess as far as PR was concerned. And then more recently, we've had the Volkswagen kind of scam, if you want to call it that, where it's been described as a classic case study textbook of crisis mismanagement. I mean, what's gone wrong here? Why did they either ignore PR, or was it just that PR's no good for that kind of thing?
It's a very interesting question, because I think the issue is that a lot of people do not actually put the time and the effort into creating a crisis plan, and when it happens, it's too late, because you then have to go through a learning curve, and it's much better to address any potential reputational risks to your company first and foremost, and then ensure that you have a rebuttal sheet and you understand what the process is and the approvals, etc. However, saying that, large companies such as the ones that you mentioned, of course, are going to have an in-house department. They're going to also have in-house crisis comms procedures. And the issue, what often I find, is that these companies, these big corporates, they have their in-house PR department, they have their crisis comms. So what goes wrong? And I tell you what goes wrong is often PR such as myself, or I'm obviously an agency PR, but an in-house PR often struggles to get the buy-in from the C-suite executives, that they do not perceive us as relevant to their day-to-day business operations. Very rarely do they give us a credible seat at the table in terms of strategic decision-making. So we're often an afterthought, and then they call us in to mop up the mess when we should have been there from the outset, and to mop up the mess when it's too late, and then blame us when it hasn't gone through. So I think the solution to it is actually to ensure that the in-house PR and the strategic communications team are given a seat at the table before the crisis occurs, and not just called in as an afterthought. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of my contemporaries who are working in-house in these large corporates, half of their battle is explaining the reason for their existence, because there is a lack of understanding of PR and a lack of appreciation.
Wow, okay. So poor thinking is at the root of it.
Yes.
Okay, so given that then, two questions that I have about the brand side of things. Clearly, when a crisis is being mishandled PR-wise, it's not doing the brand values and the brand any good. So what could PR do during that really difficult period of time? And then presumably after the crisis, if we take Volkswagen in particular, the brand value is going to go down, people are going to be wary of trust, etc. So we've got two issues. What can PR do during the crisis, but what can it do to lift that brand back up again, or is that not possible?
But ultimately, PR is about communication and should also be about transparency and authenticity. So ultimately, the effectiveness of PR is rooted in the actions of the senior executives. So the senior executives have to be decisive, transparent, and communicate on a regular basis and on a consistent basis. And then it's up to the PRs to ensure that those messages are sent to the right stakeholders. And often what happens is the senior executives, they're in crisis mode. They are, and a lot of senior executives, they feel very uncomfortable speaking to the media. So having that media training throughout, before, and not just during times of crisis. But I think it really does boil down to, I'd love to be a fly on the wall when this happens. And I'd love to see how the senior executives have liaised with their in-house PR department, both pre, during and after the crisis.
Right. So what words would you have for Volkswagen at the moment as it probably attempts to rebuild its brand, much as Toyota did? Yes. What would you say?
I would say give your senior comms people a seat at the table, not just when the mess happens. Have it at the strategic decision-making level, and that is the main issue that the in-house PRs they struggle with. I've heard it time and time again. I have in-house PR friends who work for the largest global corporations, and if the senior executive just doesn't understand PR because they consider it an intangible, it's very difficult to help that organisation.
Right.
And often it's too late. So I think a lot of it is, they joke and they say that half their job is to PR themselves to their colleagues. So getting that buy-in, understanding what PR is, and being able to therefore then utilise it as an effective tool. Don't bring us in, don't bring us in at the end when the curtains are coming down.
That sounds very scary, actually. Yeah. If they see PR as an intangible, I'm not quite sure what they make of a brand which is wholly intangible. So. Okay, now we'll put the negatives to one side now, because recently you gave an absolutely brilliant presentation about PR to a group of young entrepreneurs, and it was very well received. So I wonder if you could now give us some hints and tips for PR, how it could be used in a business, whether that business is a startup or whether it's a medium-sized business that wants to grow, or it's a global business that needs to get some thinking about PR. Yeah. Could you, I believe you have a system or a process that perhaps you'd like to tell us about.
We're very passionate about integrated PR and marketing, and so we follow the PESO model. And the PESO, it's paid, earned, shared and owned media. So paid is, for instance, advertising, but most of the paid media that we participate in and implement is mainly the social media advertising or online. So the earned is earning the right, which really is getting into top tier, such as the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, etc. And then S stands for social and shared, which has been phenomenally influential in building a brand and building trust and credibility. And then owned is your own asset, so your blog or your own website, for instance. And so what we do is we actually work across all four different channels. And the wonderful thing about it is actually people can do PR themselves if they don't have the budget. They can have an external agency, they can have an in-house PR, or they can do both. So when companies of a certain size, they often have an in-house PR and they then have external PR agencies. Now, in terms of what you can do for earned media is, first of all, understand who's your target audience. Then it's very simple. What do they read? And then you look at what they read and which newspapers, magazines, etc., and then or blogs, and then you analyze and you read and you research the journalist, and then you identify the journalist that's most likely to resonate to a pitch from you. Understand them on Twitter, read their previous articles, get to know them. The more you research, the better your pitch will be, and then the better likelihood for the pitch to be picked up by the press. And then you reach out to them with an interesting pitch. Don't make it advertorial, because editorial journalists from top tier publications, they're very interested in thought leadership. So if you're selling PR, such as myself, I wouldn't talk about, well, this is what I do and these are the benefits. I would talk about wider industry trends that are taking place, such as diversity, for instance, such as the collapse between PR and advertising. So it becomes much more relevant and interesting to their readers. So really do put yourself in the mindset of a reader of an article. How interesting is your pitch? And so that's the earned side. And then for the shared side, it's wonderful that everybody, those with a budget, without a budget, can set up social media channels. You need an internet connection, but of course, having social media channels is a little bit like having a baby. You can't just have it and leave it there. You have to maintain it. You have to constantly feed it with good content and consistent content that's consistent with your key messages. And so it's obviously this shared side of it. And then the paid side, putting the spend on Facebook or Twitter. You've got these incredible tools available on these social media platforms where you can really hone into who your target audience is, their demographic, their age, their gender, their keywords, who they follow. There's so much information out there. I mean, the metrics alone on these social media channels will teach you enormous amount about your target audience. You've got a lot of softwares, some of which have freemiums where you can access some parts of their tools, such as Hootsuite, Sprout Social, and then for content marketing around your own platforms, you've got these wonderful softwares, Moz for SEO, for instance, we use, and then we also use HubSpot for content marketing. And again, often a lot of these softwares have premium models, so those with a budget, without a budget, able to use in-house or external PR agency, this is all open to you. And then don't forget award submissions. Find out what are the relevant awards in your industry. Just make a simple spreadsheet, the date of submission, the deadlines, etc. Write a compelling narrative around your award submission, why you or your company should win the award. And often a lot of the awards is down to a question of just trying, just identifying who they are, what the deadlines are, submitting. It's quite simple, and online you just Google how to write a compelling or great award submission. Teach yourself. All the resources there. Nobody has any excuses anymore. You have the resources there if you have an internet connection. Speaker opportunities. Again, identify the key events that are happening in your industry where your target audience are going to be, and then contact the advertiser, contact the organizer. And say, I'm really passionate about this subject, I can talk on XYZ, this is my expertise, and pitch. What's the worst that they can say? They can say no. That's the worst. You go to the event if they say no, and then you network, get to meet the advertisers, get a bit of face-to-face interaction. People tend to prefer saying no on email to people that they don't know, but if you meet somebody face-to-face, you develop a relationship, and you build on that relationship, and then hopefully that relationship can be leveraged for actually coming to a win-win situation where you can provide a speaking content on a narrative that's interesting to the organizer. A lot of it is ultimately understanding the journalist mindset, the event organizer mindset, the judge who's sitting on the awards, just transporting yourself to them and understanding what, if you were then positioned, what would you be looking for? Right. And how can you bridge that with what you're selling?
Okay, so if I was simply a manufacturer of Ninja wheel boggart springs, and I suddenly decided that instead of the normal yellow ones that I made, I'd make some blue ones as well. Yes. Could that possibly be of any interest to a journalist? I mean, how could I use the power of PR to try and make something out of something that sounds a bit trivial?
The first thing that comes to mind is colour therapy. So if you're changing colour of a key component that will be visible to the end user, you can talk about colour therapy and what does blue mean and what emotions does it evoke compared to yellow. And also fundamentally, I do believe PR ought to be rooted in authenticity. So I would drill down deep and find out, well, why are you changing that colour? What's the reason behind it? Is it a business reason behind it? And really drill down. The more often a client comes to us and says, we're not a very interesting business, we sell this or whatever. All businesses are interesting because we're all people, and people are interested in people. So you've got to find the human story.
Okay, well, talking about people then, personal branding. That seems to have come to the fore in the last sort of maybe decade. It's very important for a business nowadays, I believe, and obviously if you're entrepreneurial and you're building your business, having a personal brand is something that's quite critical. Yes. We've got people like Richard Branson and the personal brand that he's created, which has obviously done him very well. What tips can you give us in terms of how we can use PR to build our own personal brand, aside from the ones that you've covered?
I think first it's very important to be conscious that we all do have personal brands, and it's not just for the Kim Kardashians and it's not just for Unilever. We all have our personal brand, self-brand, and so I think the first step is to be conscious. The second step is to Google yourself. Have a look and see what's there, because often a lot of people, not everybody, but often a lot of people, before they meet somebody or after they meet somebody or when they've heard of somebody, they will Google you. And you want to see what is the narrative online. So be it Google or another search engine, what is your Google narrative? What does it say about you? Look at your first 1 to 3 pages. If you don't like what you see, or there's nothing there, then create that narrative. Don't just let your name operate in a vacuum controlled by Google. Control your own personal narrative, and you can do that because you can create your own blogs, You can open up your own social media channels, and then you can put whatever content you want in your blogs, your websites, your social media channels, and then there you go. You have at least taken control of your narrative. Then try and get third-party narratives. So, of course, you're going to say how wonderful you are, but people are going to read it, and are they going to be swayed by it? Not so much. But at least it's a start. So then the way you build on it is you try and get third-party endorsements. So get third-party endorsements through brand adjacencies. And what I mean by that is putting your name against a brand that has brand equity. So putting your name against CNN, getting CNN to write a piece. So it's going to be difficult overnight to just get into the top 10 press. So start off with blogs, go to your industry and say, can I guest blog? And write a guest blog on their bloggers, and work your way up to more influential bloggers, in turn then top 10 media, and then also continue with your own blog, and you will find a lot of opportunities will come up through actually placing a lot of your content through interviews or through blogs on other people's platforms. And that's where the third-party endorsement comes in, because people, of course, are swayed by what you say about yourself, but they are more swayed about what a third party says about you. And if that third party has brand equity and is credible, then they are even more likely to be influenced. See, a lot of PR is about influence and understanding who are the influencers. I know that I will never be as influential it depends who your target audience is. So obviously if the target audience is a PR person, then perhaps I hope I'll be able to impart some sort of influence. But if the target audience is a fashionista, for instance, they would be hugely swayed by a Vogue fashion editor and would not be interested in what I've got to say about myself. So it's really understanding who do you want to influence and who are the circles of influence around them. And then how do you build a bridge between yourself and them to align yourself with them? And then that is how you can build credibility and influence.
Wow. Okay, well, we've covered so much material, I think, in a relatively short space of time. Thank you so much for that. I mean, do you have any final tips, ideas, or anything that you can give to us that will kind of like wrap this whole idea of public relations up?
I would say is to be fearless. Because there's so many people who do not do things because they have analysis paralysis, and they are scared. They're scared that the journalists will ignore them. They're scared that the journalists will say no, or the award submission people would say, I'm sorry, you haven't been selected. So what? Try again and again and again. And just to put it out there, I have won 4 awards in the last 18 months.
Wow.
But my God, I have applied for so many more.
Okay.
So don't be afraid of rejection, don't be afraid of failure. I've spent my entire working career, one failure after another. You just get up, you learn from it, you move on, and be fearless. Okay.
Farzana, thank you so much for being with me today. I hope we can actually come back to you, because I'm sure that this will mean that there will be a lot of questions coming back that I certainly wouldn't be able to answer in the depth that you've been able to answer. So I hope that's okay.
Honored.
Thank you. And we'll obviously provide a link to Curzon PR as part of this brand blog. So thank you once again, Farzana.